Hi, fourth grade. Well, here we are, our last week together, and we're going to jump right into our Monday work. I've sent the plans to you, and some of this week is just going to be wrapping up some things, making sure we get just a couple of other things in the red folder. I do want to stress a couple things, to just remember to just do the best you can. I'm going to look at your work, but I know that we're all in a different situation and everyone has so much going on right now. So again, like I've said from the very, very beginning, just go ahead and do your best. And I have sent you an email with specific information about dropping off some textbooks and your return to school folder this Friday from 8 to 3 at school. So you can go ahead and refer to that email about doing that. And also just some specific instructions for today. The week at a glance is in the email today, so you can kind of work through everything at your own pace. And I'm going to give you some daily instructions for Monday. Again, the lessons specifically are kind of dying down a little bit, but we still will have work to complete, okay? And we're going to actually start by explaining that with math, when I meant the lessons kind of dying down. So we're going to go ahead and do a math test this week. And as I put in the email, again, I'm going to evaluate it, and just see where everybody's at and how everyone is doing. So you don't need to complete the entire test. So make sure that you're paying close attention to the numbers that I told you to complete, and go ahead and circle all of those today and double check them. Probably would be easier, so then you don't have to keep referring back to this Monday email to figure out what you need to complete in terms of the math test. So I just want you to work on that from today until Thursday. It's a 2-page test. Just complete the problems that I ask you to in the email, and then this is going to go in your red folder, or not your red folder, your return to school folder. That's going to go in your return to school folder to come back to me on Friday, okay? We're also going to be wrapping up some history this week. We're going to be reading today and tomorrow pages 112 through 114 and talking about the Revolutionary War itself. We've been reading a lot about all of the events leading up to that, including the Declaration of Independence. Hopefully you finished your George Washington packet and you were able to put that in your return to school folder as well. And the first chapter here, the first paragraph of our passages today that we're going to be reading says, "The Declaration of Independence did not end the war, neither did it give the colonists their freedom. Americans would have to prove to the world that they meant what they said. They must win the war." And so today we're going to be reading more about George Washington, the patriots who risked their lives, and the colonial army at Trenton, New Jersey, as well as some patriots and a little bit about Betsy Ross as well, with stitching together the American flag. So that will be work for today and tomorrow. And when you're finished with this, you can just write comprehension check 10E at the top and go ahead and place that in your return to school folder. All right. Next, we're going to be talking a little bit about science, and we've been learning so much about astronomy, and today and tomorrow we're going to focus on the sun and the moon, okay? And so go ahead and read pages 262 through 264. You're only going to complete the comprehension check 1 through 4 for 9-4, and the reason for that is because some of the other questions have to do with the experiment on 263 that we're not going to do. So you only need to do questions 1 through 4 as we learn more. I'm sorry, not the sun and the moon. We're only learning specifically about the sun today and tomorrow, and then we'll get into the moon on Wednesday and Thursday. And you might notice at the end of this book, this chapter, it says 9.6 on page 269, if you want to turn there. It says 9.6, the origin of the universe. Well, we know that God created the universe. It didn't just magically happen, didn't just come to be because something exploded and all of this beautiful creation just randomly appeared. No, we know the truth, and the truth is that God, with intention and creativity and love, created the whole universe, all of the heavens and the earth. And so we are going to focus on that actually for our Bible this week. So we're going to kind of do something called cross-curricular work, where we're learning 2 different subjects at the same time. So on page 261 through 273, I want you to read that. And this might even be something really fun to read as a devotional with your family, especially as spring is coming and everything is just coming to life, and just all of God's creation just seems to be singing, doesn't it? With just the birds chirping and the flowers blooming, and there's just so much beauty happening right now in our world in terms of life that's growing up right out of the ground before our very eyes. And so it might be fun to even do this as a devotional, but I would like for you to read in the science book about God creating the whole entire universe. And so for page 269 through 271, you can just go ahead and read this on your own this week, okay? And it even reminds me of the chapel we did with Pastor Hal, where we stood up and did all of the motions for the 7, all of the 7 days, right? And light and darkness, light and darkness. Maybe you remember doing that with him, and that's always such a fun chapel when he comes and does that. So what I would like for you to do is I'd like for you to choose one of the days to draw a picture of, all right? Read all of them, draw one of the days. We know that God rested on the 7th day, right? And I just want you to put at the top what day it was and what God created, all right? You can choose whichever day you like, and then place that in your return to school folder. So I hope that is a blessing to you this week. I just thought this would be the perfect time to focus on creation right now. And also, there are still a lot of really great lessons in your Building Castles book. And even though we don't have time to finish those this year, I would really encourage you to do those on your own. Be in the Word of God this summer. Be in the Word of God as a family. You could do those, the rest of that workbook, as just family devotions, or even maybe devotions with a sibling or a brother or sister, or just devotions with somebody else, I know since school hasn't been taking place in the building, I know both Sydney and Griffin have been doing devotionals with their friends and reading the Bible with their friends, and it's just been a really wonderful blessing. So stay in the Word of God this summer, and the great thing is you don't even have to really find any lessons. You can read the Bible on your own, and you can also do your Building Castles workbook and finish up those awesome Bible stories there, okay? All right, and we're also going to be finishing Mr. Popper's Penguins this week, and I'm going to read chapter 17 to you today, and I'd like for you to do chapter 18 on your own for homework tonight, or for today. You can read. And then we are going to finish Mr. Popper's Penguins with the last thing in your May work folder, which is the story map. So as you can see, you would want to put your name at the top of this, and you can fill out the following information without having finished the book, okay? You can complete the title of the book, the setting of the book. You could scroll back up and go all the way up to chapter 1, right? Setting is time and place, right? So where is the town or the street where it takes place, and what time are we talking about? Okay, what time period are we talking about? All right, and then the author, you should write here on the line, and illustrator is the person who draws the pictures, so you can fill that out, and then you can list some of our characters, right? And we are thinking about the Popper family, and maybe some of the names of the penguins. You can include that in your box. And then you can definitely start your story map, because we've definitely gotten through the beginning of the story, okay? And you could begin, I'd like for you to write a complete sentence in the box that tells me how the story began, okay? So you can summarize that and put it in your own words, how the story began. And then be thinking about what happened in the middle of the story, what was maybe a really important event that happened in the middle of the story, and write a sentence for that. And then as we roll along and finish this book together this week, you can then do a final sentence maybe on Thursday of how the book ends, okay? And then I'd like for you to place this in your return to school folder, all right? Okay, so let's go ahead and read chapter 17 called Fame. I mean, we know from reading 15 and 16 that the Poppers are going into showbiz here, all right? The Byrds soon became so famous that whenever it was known that the Popper performing Penguins were to appear at any theater, the crowds would stand in line for half a mile down the street, waiting their turn to buy tickets. The other actors on the program were not always so pleased, however, and once in Minneapolis, a celebrated lady opera singer got very much annoyed when she heard that the Popper Penguins were to appear on the same program. In fact, she refused to go on the stage unless the Penguins were put away. So the stagehands helped Mr. and Mrs. Popper and the children get the Byrds off the stage and downstairs to a basement under the stage, while the manager guarded the stage entrance to make sure that the Penguins did not get past. Down in the basement, the Byrds soon discovered another little flight of steps going up, and in another minute, the audience was shrieking with laughter as the Penguins' heads suddenly appeared, one by one, in the orchestra pit where the musicians were playing. The musicians kept on playing, and the lady on the stage, when she saw the Penguins, sang all the louder to show how angry she was. The audience was laughing so hard that nobody could hear the words of her song. Mr. Popper, who had followed the Penguins up the stairs, stopped when he saw that it led to the orchestra pit. "I don't think I'm supposed to go up there with the musicians," he told Mrs. Popper. "The Penguins did," said Mrs. Popper. "Papa, you'd better get them off before they start biting the pegs and strings off the fiddles," said Bill. "Oh, dear, I just don't know what to do," said Mr. Popper. "I just don't know what to do," said Mr. Popper, sitting down helplessly on the top step. "Then I will catch the Penguins," said Mrs. Popper, climbing up past him with Janie and Bill following. When they saw Mrs. Popper coming up after them, the Penguins felt very guilty because they knew they did not belong there. So they jumped up on the stage, ran over the floodlights, and hid under the singing lady's blue skirts. That stopped the singing entirely except for one high, shrill note that had not been written in the music. The Byrds loved the bright lights of the theater and the great laughing audience and all the traveling. There was always something new to see. From Stillwater out to the Pacific coast they traveled. It was a long way now to the little house at 432 Proudfoot Avenue. There's your setting. Where the Poppers had to worry about whether their money would hold up until spring. And every week they got a check for $5,000. When they were not actually playing in some theater or traveling on trains between cities, their life was spent in the larger hotels. Now and then, a startled hotel keeper would object to having the Byrds register there. "Why we don't allow lapdogs in this hotel," he would say. "Yes, but do you have any rule against penguins?" Mr. Popper would ask. Then the hotel keeper would have to admit that there was no rule at all about penguins. And of course, when he saw how neat the penguins were and how other guests came to his hotel in the hope of seeing them, he was very glad to have them. You might think that a large hotel would offer a great many opportunities for mischief to a lot of penguins, but they behave very well on the whole, never doing anything worse than riding up and down too often in the elevators and occasionally biting the brass buttons off some belly boy's uniform. $5,000 a week may sound like a great deal of money, and yet the Poppers were far from rich. It was quite expensive to live in grand hotels and travel about town in taxi cabs. Mr. Popper often thought that the Penguins could just as well walk back and forth between hotels and theaters, but every one of their walks looked so much like a parade that it always tied up the traffic. So Mr. Popper, who never liked to be a nuisance to anyone, always took taxis instead. It was expensive to have huge cakes of ice brought up to the hotel rooms to cool the Penguins. The bills in the fine restaurant where the Poppers often took their meals were often dreadfully high. Fortunately, however, the Penguins' food had stopped being an expense to them. On the road, they had to give up having tank cars of live fish shipped to them because it was so hard to get deliveries on time, so they went back to feeding the Byrds on canned shrimps. This cost them absolutely nothing, for Mr. Popper had written a testimonial saying, "Poppers performing penguins thrive on Ocean's oceanic shrimp." This statement with a picture of the 12 penguins was printed in all the leading magazines, and the Ocean's Oceanic Shrimp Company gave Mr. Popper an order that was good for free cans of shrimps at any store anywhere in the country. Several other companies, such as the Great Western Spinach Growers Association and the Energetic Breakfast Oats Company, wanted him to recommend their product to and offered him large sums of cash, but the Penguins simply refused to eat spinach or oats, and Mr. Popper was much too honest to say they would, even though he knew the money would come in handy.